Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Howdy, friends, and welcome to the Ted Lasso Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and I'm thrilled to be here with y'all today. Now, folks, if you're like me, you can't get enough of Ted and the gang over at AFC Richmond. That's why I'm here, to dive deep into every episode of this wonderful show and share my thoughts and insights with all of you lovely folks out there. We're going to laugh, we're going to cry, and we're going to have a heck of a good time doing it. So grab your biscuits, settle in, and let's get started, shall we? In this episode, episode 2 of Ted Lasso Season 3, I don't want to go to Chelsea. I don't want to go to Chelsea. Of course, there's parentheses around I don't want to go to. Kind of a spoiler in some instances of this episode in some mild way. I don't know. A very weird title. I don't get the title of this episode. I don't get it. But this episode came out March 22nd, 2023, directed by MJ Delaney. And in this episode, we have a potential new player known as Zava, possibly going to Chelsea or West Ham by the title. Maybe Chelsea is a little bit absurd of a potential, but that is where we're at with this player, Zava. However, Rebecca wants him to, right? But only to beat Rupert. Like, her only goal, her only drive in this season is to beat Rupert. You have Keeley, is still trying to settle into her new role at her new and settle in with her new employees. She brings a friend in, hires a friend to join her company. We have everyone in the show finding out about Roy and Keeley, their breakup, and no one understands why he broke up with her. We have Trent Crimm in this episode, back, no longer with the Independent, as I mentioned from the previous episode, when he gave up his sources that Nate told the newspaper that Trent, the Independent, that Ted Lasso was suffering from panic attacks, not food poisoning, which let them fire Trent for revealing his sources. But he is there too. He's going to write a book about Richmond. And we find out that Roy has some beef with Trent Crimm. We find out about that. Richmond plays its first game against Chelsea. I actually don't know if it's their first game of the season, but it's the first game of this season of the show. So we get a little bit more of the team in this episode, as we didn't get in the first episode. It also brings up feelings for Roy going to play at Chelsea, who had a pivotal game at Chelsea before deciding to make a change. So a lot of things involving Roy, Chelsea, Trent Crimm, Keeley. We also have this new player, Zava, that may or may not be going to either Chelsea or West Ham, or even potentially Richmond. So this episode starts off, we have Keeley trying to bond with her CFO, Barbara, who was appointed by the investors in her company. She's also trying to bond with the other employees, but none of them are all really into it, right? Keeley is much more of a personable person. Everybody else is kind of, buttoned up suit, kind of corporate type of people, right? And probably nervous to socialize and be friendly with their boss in general. But Keeley's trying to open up to them, not working out very well. We have Ted, Trent, and Rebecca. We have Ted busts into Rebecca's office, just full of joy. Ted is joyful in this episode as opposed to the last episode where he's kind of, sad that his son went back to the U.S., but he busts in to give Rebecca her morning biscuits. Keeley is in the office as well. And as well as Trent Crimm, who is sitting down and wants to follow the team around to write a book. And they all act like they are for it, right? They're super supportive of this decision. But as soon as Trent turns his back to Higgins, Rebecca, and Keeley to see what Ted thinks about it because they're all, yeah, we should see it, but we wanted to run it by you, Ted. So when he turns around to see what Ted's thoughts are, everybody behind Trent's back is trying to tell Ted no. But of course, Ted, super positive, supportive. He's like, well, I don't see why not. Why don't you come on, right? So we have Higgins gets a notification on his phone that the player Zava wants to move to London from Italy because his wife was a fan of The Office. And of course, there's a funny little back and forth where Ted assumes, well, isn't that Scranton, Pennsylvania? And they're like, no, the original, right? Playing into the, oh, silly American. But he wants to play in the Premier League because his wife binged The Office, which I don't know, like, how many seasons did the UK Office go for? What, like 2? It just, like, the term binge, especially of a TV show, kind of implies a lot of episodes. And I don't think there were that many episodes of the original Office. But regardless, so I could see, in addition to Ted obviously thinking through the lens of an American, thinking of the American Office, I can also see how the term binge could potentially confuse things as well. Keeley is impressed with Zava's social media following, right, and his engagement. So she's like, yeah, that's why she's so impressed by this guy. And then we find out that he's kind of like a diva, super expensive, right? He never stays with a team very long. He's been to 14 teams in the past 15 years, so he moves around a lot. So it's not surprising that he, on the drop of a hat, wants to go play for another team. But he's also great. Obviously, brings in a lot of money. So it's it's a hot take for AFC Richmond, despite the fact that AFC Richmond has 2 aces. Although they don't really seem like aces much in this episode. But yeah, they want another guy, another hotshot to bring in to hopefully help them win more games, right? And to keep from being relegated again. And despite Rebecca not wanting to, she says that they should go try and get him, right? She wants to get him. All the while, they're discussing this in front of Trent Crimm, right, who's writing the book, who they don't want there to write this book. But, I'm sure he will. I'm sure the addition of Trent Crimm writing this book, one, it brings a character back that's kind of a fun character, somebody that respects Ted Lasso. They did that article where he saw how genuine Ted is, and I think deep down, and also gave Ted the heads up, I think deep down Trent Crimm is a positive guy and on some level believes in what they could potentially do. But at the same time, I could see how this book that he's writing can come back to bite them in the end. Potentially. Or maybe it'll be a good thing. It's just an interesting addition to the mix that's going on over at AFC Richmond. And I'm sure possibly mention the reluctance to bring Zava in. Maybe Zava will catch wind of this, like, oh, you didn't want me here, so I guess I'll just leave. Like, it might just give him an excuse to leave if he even gets to Richmond. Trent asks Rebecca if she's only going after Zava because her ex-husband wants him. And, again, as Trent's asking her, everybody behind Trent is telling her, no, don't say it. But she says yes, which he loves. He's like, I kind of love that, right? I love that you are this competition, that you're in competition with this guy who he knows treated her like shit. So he loves it. It'll be interesting just to see how Trent's influence on the team and being around the team and all that. Cut to Ted and Keeley. Ted is excited to hear about Keeley's as they leave the office, Ted kind of pulls Keeley aside, asking her about this new life as the boss of her new company. and she just wishes her coworkers would loosen up. She wishes there was more cohesiveness amongst them. And of course, Ted recommends a group trip. Why don't you take them on a field trip? We just went to the sewers last week, right? She comes back with getting a shaman. She's like, yeah, we should do something as a group. She's like, well, maybe I should get a shaman. We should all do some ayahuasca ceremony, which is like, definitely not what Ted had in mind. But he was thinking more of an escape room, not a spiritual awakening, going to an ayahuasca ceremony. And as she goes, she runs into Isaac, who wants a shoe deal. And she's like, no brands specifically, but just wants shoes. And she's like, well, I'll see what I can do. And she runs into Jamie as well in the hallway, who seems a bit nervous around her, potentially because he still thinks that she's with Roy. Then she runs into Roy, which Isaac and Jamie are watching this interaction, watching Keeley and Roy's giving her a bag of her things, and they're like, oh, like they broke up. I can tell. Isaac's like, they broke up. I can tell. Which, of course, Jamie then, after Keeley and Roy do their thing, we don't see what they say, but as Roy walks towards Jamie and Isaac, Jamie Tart confronts Roy, talking to Roy about the breakup, right? And he tries to be empathetic and give him a hug. Roy pushes him away. Obviously, we saw the last season when Jamie Tart had his issue with his dad in the locker room after a loss, and you saw Roy give Jamie a big hug, and Jamie cried on his shoulder. Like, those two characters have really bonded last season. And Jamie character's character has really changed too. So it's not that surprising necessarily that he would be empathetic about this. Obviously, he was in a relationship with Keeley as well, and he's one of, like everybody else, surprised when he finds out that Roy was the one that broke up with her. Everybody assumes it was the other way around. And, Roy not being that receptive to any kind of physical, no touching. Roy's not he'll give you a hug. You don't give him a hug, right? And it seems like Jamie's really being genuine, right? And really cares about Roy, which is sweet. It definitely a character in Jamie Tart who was pretty unlikable at first, and now it's definitely come around to be one of the more likable characters in the show. Which seems to be a running gag of this season, is the scene happened in the last episode. It happens again where Jamie and Roy are in the equipment room, and the equipment manager kid that took over for Nate, right, that Nate gave shit to, happens to be in there and overhearing these things, which is like a running gag that seems to be happening. While people are having this heart-to-heart, this equipment kid just happens to be in the room. And they tell him not to say anything either. And he's like trying to relate to them. And he's like, yeah, I know what it's like being dumped, and suggests like, oh, we should all go to a pub and kind of have some drinks and talk about it. And they're like, no, kid, just keep your mouth shut, right? Cut to Coach Beard and Ted. Beard walks in to the office and finds Ted reading one of his books on football tactics, and it's titled Inverting the Pyramid, which was the title of the last episode of season 2. I think there was an addition to that title, but Ted can't get past the table of contents. Too confusing for him in the book. He's just going to wait for the film adaptation of it. Ted mentions that they might get this guy named Zava, and Coach Beard lets out a yelp, one of many yelps that Coach Beard lets out in this episode, right? He is stoked about this idea. And Ted has no idea who he is, so Beard decides to show him a video that went viral online about a store clerk being held up at gunpoint, or being, I don't know if there was a gun involved. Not a lot of guns in the UK. But a store clerk being held up, and this guy coming through the line has like bags of chips and arms full of snacks in his hand, just headbutts the guy and just walks out like super cash. He's like, that's Zava, that guy that just headbutted that other guy, that's him. Right? So Ted had seen that clip, didn't know that was him. He's like, wow, that's impressive. And we find out that Ted has an alarm on his phone, a notification when the time turns 11:11 for him to make a wish, with both him and Coach Beard make a wish. And there's a little argument over, like, tell me what your wish is. No, it'll spoil it. So they don't want to. It's a fun little moment between the two of them. And then they hear an argument going on in the locker room, right? And it's between Sam and Isaac, which is, Sam not one to get in an argument. Isaac, a little bit of temper, but them two going at it. Ted comes in, stops it, and he assumes it's because they heard that Zava's coming, right? Ted's assumption with every person he tells the news is that people aren't into this idea. They're not going to like somebody coming into their team, which Coach Beard was stoked about. When he says, assuming this argument was over Zava, they weren't, right? They're all super stoked at that idea. And you hear Danny Rojas apparently also makes wishes at 11:11 because he actually made a wish for Zava to join the team just a couple minutes, just like 30 seconds ago, right? Which was the same time they were making the wish. So 11:11, not only are the two coaches, but also Danny Rojas taking the time at 11:11 to make a wish. And he wished for Zava to join the team. So Ted then calms them down from now celebrating to ask if they were angry about Trent Crimm writing the book about them. And then one player asked if he's writing the book about Zava coming to the team. Right? And then he's like, no. Then another player's like confusing it even more by asking if Trent is writing a book about Zava. And then Ted's like correcting him. He's like, no. But he only corrects him, but only confuses it more by Zava would be writing a book about Trent Crimm. Like, it is a funny confusion of what is happening, who's writing a book about who, what's going on. Obviously, Ted calms them down again to see why they were so worked up. And it turns out that they were arguing because Roy and Keeley broke up, which only left me wondering what Sam Obasanya and Isaac were arguing about when it comes to whether maybe it was like arguing over who broke up with who. Maybe, right? But it definitely one of the big through lines through this episode are people who are like, really, out of the three things that are happening with Zava, Trent Crimm, the Roy and Keeley breakup is the most controversial, biggest news of this episode for everybody involved. And I would say is kind of the writers of this show acknowledging that they know that people who like this show will also be flabbergasted that they broke up, as I was. And in that moment, when they say that it's because Roy broke up with Keeley, we find out that Beard didn't know because he lets out another yelp and really just kind of comes in out of nowhere. And Ted almost faints, which is kind of funny as well. So then you have the team. Roy walks in, and the entire team gives him a look and a sigh. Like, oh, like they're pitying Roy because they broke up. Roy goes to attack Jamie, who didn't, because he thinks Jamie told everybody. And he's like, I didn't tell them. Right? Then Ted asks, if he wants to talk. Roy, of course, says no. Of course he doesn't want to talk. He barely joined the Diamond Dogs in the last season. He doesn't want a hug from he doesn't want anything. He's not open. He's not receptive of those types of things. But of course Ted asks him. And Ted trying to play it off. He's like, no, I didn't mean to talk about that. I was going to talk to you about Zava. And even Roy enjoys this idea. It'll help them win games. So even like every person that Ted thinks he's going to get the negative reaction when finding out Zava might come and play with them, it's always the opposite. Everybody's stoked that Zava might come, including Roy, which Roy isn't playing, so of course he wants the team to win, right? And then Ted's like, no, actually, I was going to talk to you about Keeley. Ted tells the equipment manager to go to his apartment and get the breakup CD he has in his desk. And the kid's like, what is a CD? Which is just painful. Why do they have to do that in the show? And Beard is on it. He knows exactly where. Ted goes to throw him his keys, and just they don't get caught because Beard has a set of his own, of Ted's keys, so he doesn't need them. And Ted tries to tell Roy it's okay to be dumped, and Roy tells him that he actually broke up with her. And then Beard comes out of nowhere and does another yelp, right? Finding out that it wasn't Keeley dumping him, it was the other way around. And just as Roy says this, it just it couldn't get any worse. Like, this is the worst. Like, everybody knowing that he dumped Keeley is like his own personal hell. But then, just at that moment, Higgins walks in with Trent Crimm on a tour of the building, which we find out that Roy isn't a fan of Trent Crimm. Roy doesn't know that Trent Crimm is writing the book, and when he finds out, he tells everybody not to talk to Trent, or he'll put his forehead through their skull. Don't talk to this dude, right? So he leaves in a huff, slams the door, and you can see in that scene Jamie trying his best not to break. He's like holding in laughter to see Roy like leave in a huff. Funny little moment. Let's take a quick break from this episode to talk about, are you a fan of art, movies, and all things entertainment? Then you need to check out youtube.com/inspired disorder. Our page is jam-packed with all kinds of great content, including making of videos of the many faces, an ongoing art series of abstract ink paintings. But that's not all. We also feature daily episodes from The Ray Taylor Show, a podcast that brings you movie reviews, TV show reviews, episode recaps, opinions on news and entertainment, and much more. There's also a weekly diary and top 5 movie rankings of a variety of categories. And if that wasn't enough, we've also got how-to videos covering all kinds of topics. So why wait? Head on over to youtube.com/inspired disorder and start exploring the amazing content we have to offer. And now back to the show. Ted gives Trent a nice welcome. And Danny gives like a woohoo, like yay, welcome as well, right? And then he remembers what Roy said, and in the funniest way that Danny Rojas could, he's like, I mean, fuck off, Trent Crimm, and his accent is so thick it sounds like he said tent cream. I mean, fuck off, Trent Crimm. Hilarious. Cut to Keeley, right? Where there's like a little sheep on stage, right? She has this ad that she's doing that her CFO made sure to tell her. It's like, don't go overtime. We can't afford to go overtime. But then Keeley's like, yeah, but we need to make a good ad, right? So now they're at this ad, the shoot for this ad. And there's this like little sheep on stage in like a dance club, right? And you see, like, as the camera pulls back, we see that it's the shoot, that this ad that Keeley is making. And she gets a text from Ted, who just heard the news. You tell me when, you tell me where, because I frickin' know the why, right? Ted's like, we need to talk. Like, he just heard the goss. He needs to know what the deal is. Why did you do, what is going on? Like, it doesn't make sense to anybody in the show, outside of the show, except there is a problem with this, because the time on the phone On her phone, when she sees this text, when Ted not only found out about the breakup, but then had the time to text Keeley, which we know is after 11/11. He made his wish, went into the locker room. That's when he found out the breakup happened, right? So it should be 11:30, let's say, after the whole stuff in the locker room. Then Ted's like texting Keeley, but the time on her phone when she sees this text is at 11:09. So just a little error I noticed. I'm like, wait a minute. They made a big point about it being 11/11. So this show is saying that he knew about the breakup. Maybe he did know about the breakup before. It didn't seem like he did. It seemed like he found out about it. He's passed out. What was passed out when he found out? Anyway. One of the extras in this advertising shoot is an old friend of Keeley's, and she's so proud of Keeley. She finally got out, right? She's just not just dating footballers like she is, right? She actually is making something of herself. She's successful. And the producers or directors come over and they want more extras because the club shots, it just feels too empty. And her friend has a great idea, have the camera, the little camera trick, strobe light, have people walk in front of the camera, make it look like a lot of people are there, right? So she kind of knows how to, on a budget, make things look better on camera, especially has experience as an actress doing these types of things. So I'm sure she's seen it before, right? So they're super stoked. They get to save some money. And Keeley's stoked. Oh, it's like my friend. You kind of know this stuff. Keeley doesn't really know much. Doesn't have that experience. She's good at what she's good at. Then cut to Rebecca, who's on FaceTime with her mom. So her mom pops up for a little bit in this episode. And her mom had a dream that she died. And her mom's supposed to be at some camping retreat, but of course she's staying in a hotel. She's like, well, I'm not actually going to sleep out there. All the stars look like they're staring at me, right? And she's trying to set Rebecca up with her psychic, right? She's like, oh, you want to set me up with your psychic who's going to charge me a bunch of money to tell me whatever she makes up. And before anything, she ends up hanging up. Higgins comes in with an update about Zava. And he doesn't want to meet with them. Also, that he doesn't want to meet with, her. Also, he said that he will not be signing with West Ham. At least that's what the news, the kind of chain of telephone that Higgins got that news from, that he actually wants to go to Chelsea. Rebecca knows that it will only make him saying he doesn't want to go to West Ham will only make Rupert want to get Zava even more. And Rupert says there's nothing that he can do, or Higgins says there's nothing Rupert can do, which Rebecca's like, no, don't jinx it. You can't jinx it. You can't say there's just nothing he can do. It's like he can do. He's pretty persuasive. Cut to Trent walking in. And everyone giving him kind of the cold shoulder. He's walking into the facility the next day at work or whatever. And in the hallways, people are just ignoring him, obviously worried that they're going to get Roy's forehead through their skull. Jamie refuses to shake his hand. The team goes completely silent when he enters the locker room, even though he's going in there to compliment them. And then as soon as he leaves the locker room, he hears them all go back to talking. And he kind of gives a smile. It's like, okay, like he respects it on some level. And he's actually sharing an office with Roy, which I'm sure Roy hates. Already has a problem with it. We don't know what the problem is. But he's sharing an office, which doesn't help anyway. And he thanks him despite the idea of sharing the office was Ted's idea. Roy's desk is like full of flowers and cards, like this condolences that he's no longer in a relationship with Keeley. Trent tries to chat about their upcoming match against Chelsea because, right, it's going to be his first time back since retiring. And Trent gets a call, and Roy decides to, in that moment, to start popping the balloons to interrupt Trent's call, just, make him leave the office, which Trent decides to take the call outside. Cut to Keeley. She's back at her office. She's given a company credit card from the CFO, but told not to use it on anything. Keeley's friend is there from the shoot, and she introduces her friend Sandy, who she just hired. It's like, hey, CFO, this is my friend Sandy, or Shandy, I should say. And she just hired, and she has no idea. She asks her what position. Keeley's like throws out these loosely connected terms that may be positions at a company somewhere, clearly not really sure of what she will actually do, but wanting her to work there. Because she did show, at least in that one moment at the shoot, that she could potentially be helpful. And they're friends. She has nobody Keeley has nobody that she works with that she is friendly with, and she needs to be friends with somebody she works with, And Barbara decides to see what experience she has. She asks what experience, and of course she has no experience, no education. So, nothing really qualifies her for working there. And she kind of gives Keeley shit and leaves. And then Keeley goes to tell her how rude she was, and sees that Barbara has this massive collection of snow globes. And Keeley tells her that she believes in her friend, and maybe that, they can believe in her together, right? And they talk about how it's like, oh, you must love working for a company that trusts you to go fly, to send you, like, you're so useful. They send you to go all these amazing places for you to go work. And I'm sure on some level, Barbara is like, doesn't see it that way. Because she's constantly moving from one place to another, she never can make friends anywhere, right? So I could see definitely a relationship blossoming between Keeley and Rebecca at some point. But on her way out, Barbara lets Keeley know, like, here, this is a position that your friend can have. And Keeley's happy. He's like, oh, she's like, okay, Barbara is at least going to help figure this out. Right? Seems like they're going to warm up to each other. Cut to Trent is waiting for Roy outside for him to leave, and asking him just to give him a chance. And Roy tells him to go fuck off. Cut to the pub, the team pub, I should say, celebrating their return to the Premier League, right? All the fans, the bartender from the pub we haven't seen since last season. Finally, they're back. They're all happy. They're wearing their hats and all these things. Everybody's super stoked and happy to be back. Cut to Rebecca asking Keeley how work is going. And she says it's great. Meanwhile, she gets a text from Shandy, who is wanting. They're in the stadium. The game is about to start against Chelsea. That's why the fans are all stoked at the pub. They're waiting for the game to start. Rebecca and Keeley are sitting down in their box seats or whatever. Rebecca asking Keeley how everything's going with her friend. And in that moment, Keeley gets a text, and Shandy wants to use the company card to bring mimosas to work the next day, right? So already possibly a bad decision from Keeley. Her friend not really focused on gaining any success in any real way, just kind of looking to take advantage of this opportunity to day drink with her friend and kind of exploit her position to not really do much, right? Higgins shows up and has an update on Zava again, going to Chelsea based on the very weak 10-person chain of information. Rebecca asks if Rupert has been seen anywhere. Higgins says no, and again he said there's nothing he can do, and again Rebecca's like, don't you jinx this! Stop jinxing this, Higgins! Cut to Roy. Says hi to one of the staff that's working on the field, right? Kind of gives him an insult behind his back. The dude turns around. Bruce turns around. He's like, "Oh, Roy, how's it going?" And he tells Roy, he's like, and I heard what happened. I heard the bad news. And again, Roy angrily says that he broke up with her. And again, Bruce doesn't even understand why Roy would do such a thing. And then you hear the fans in the crowd seeing Roy cheering Roy Kent, the cheer they have for him. And then you see Keeley up in the stands hearing the crowd cheering for Roy. And then she looks down at Roy and, she's kind of got she clearly, it's just like so stupid that they're broke up. Like, she clearly loves the guy. She's like happy that these fans still love him. She's happy. She's one of the main reasons he's even a coach with Richmond. She tried to get him a job being a pundit, and it clearly didn't work out in that romantic rom-com episode from last season where he goes running back to become a coach, right? So there's definitely a lot of pride and love from Keeley to see this, and it's clear that Roy still loves her. It's just so stupid. But Keeley sees her and from the fan, and Rebecca grabs her hand because, obviously a sore subject. She's not happy about the fact they broke up, tells her it's okay. Then you see Zava showing up. He's sitting, a little bit down the ways from where Keeley and Rebecca and Higgins are. And everybody is in awe, including Danny, who sees, from the field. He's like, "Oh, did you see Zava is here," right? And he's like, "I'm so nervous to play. I haven't been this nervous to play in forever," right? And Higgins is even caught filming Zava, right? Everybody's kind of enamored by this guy. And Chelsea gets an easy first goal, and Higgins gags when he sees that Rupert has shown up. The jinx that Rupert can't do anything. Guess who shows up? Rupert himself shows up to schmooze with Zava. And Higgins finally agrees that he may have jinxed things. Rebecca tells Higgins to go get info. Go tap into your telephone of random things and see if you can find out anything about what's going on. And she tells Keeley how she first met Rupert, right? She was a bartender, and he came in with his wife at the time, and he's like the life of the party. Everybody loved him. He asked her out, or he came back again the next day or whatever without his wife and asked her out. And she turned him down. It's like, "I just saw you with your wife. What are you doing?" But he ended up coming back night after night after night, right, just to chat with her, right, from until closing, right, keeping her company, right, a little fine line between stalking and romance. And after 6 weeks, he asked her again, and she said yes because he made her feel special, right? The dude knows how to get what he wants. So many of the worst dudes are the most charming to get what they want, and once they get what they want, they don't care anymore. Because for them, it's all about the chase, the hunt, right? So because of that, because she knows how Rupert snagged her, she knows that he's going to do that. He's going to use that same charm to get Zava. Then you have halftime, Ted with the team in the locker room, right? Their team is so unoffensive that it could be a Hallmark Christmas movie, right? You have Danny had the ball hit off his face, right, and almost went in, right? So Danny's happy that, his face almost scored a goal. It's like the only positive thing that's going for this team, that's not doing very well. And then as Jamie starts to give his advice on what they can do, because they don't have Nate anymore. So it's very much of who's got an idea, especially after the trip to the sewer system. They've all got to rely on each other to figure this thing out together. And as soon as Jamie's starting to give his advice, Trent walks in, which of course causes everybody to be quiet. And Roy's super happy with the team being quiet once Trent walks in, right? But Ted wants to talk to Roy because this isn't good for the team. And when they walk into the showers, and the first thing Roy's like, yeah, I want to know what this whole Hallmark Christmas movie thing is. And Ted's like, listen, Roy, I need you to squash whatever's between you and Trent, right? Because it's going to sabotage this team's chance to win, right? You need to do what's right for the team, and whatever you have with Trent, you need to squash that and put it past you, get past it, right? And then right after that, Ted's like breaking down what a Hallmark Christmas movie is, usually like a big city girl falling in love with her childhood crush who usually is like running some kind of Christmas tree farm, right? Like the movies suck, but they're actually really great, right? And Roy yells at Crimm to join him in the showers, right? And Roy pulls out his wallet and then pulls an article out from his wallet, an old, weathered article out of his wallet. And it's written by Trent Crimm, who's criticizing Roy on his Premier League debut when he was 17 years old. So I don't know how old Roy Kent is supposed to be, right? Late 30s, early 40s. I don't know. But it's been quite a while. Wouldn't be surprised if like half of his life he has had this against Trent Crimm of this first article. And Trent's like, man, I thought I was being edgy, right? It's just like slamming Roy. And he apologizes. And Roy mentions that they have a lot in common, right? Obviously, they were both trying to be impressive. They were both young at the time and trying to be this like aggressive. And that's kind of Roy's style, was to be aggressive, overly aggressive maybe. So Roy identifies that they have a lot in common, right? And then Roy goes back into the locker room and tells the team that they can talk around him now, right? So then Jamie's like, okay, going to go continue what his advice was going to be, right? And the team supports it, what Jamie's advice is. So it's like the coaching staff, there's no actual coaching going on from the coaching staff, no actual plans or strategies from the coaching staff, right? It's just the team coming up with something together. Let's take a quick break from this episode because I want to talk about, are you looking to add some unique and expressive artwork to your home, office, or wardrobe? Look no further than the Many Faces series by Ray Taylor. That's me. These abstract paintings on paper explore the endless possibilities of the human face, capturing unique expressions of emotion, mood, tone, and energy in just a few minimal features. Now you can bring these stunning and thought-provoking pieces into your own space with high-quality prints and t-shirts, featuring designs from the Many Faces series. Or take home a one-of-a-kind original piece for your collection. Don't miss out on this opportunity to add some original and expressive artwork to your home, office, or wardrobe. Head on over to InspiredDisorder.com to browse and purchase original artworks, prints, and t-shirts from the Many Faces series today. And now, back to the show. Cut to Higgins, Rebecca, and Zava. Higgins hears how Zava will be going to West Ham now. And Rebecca decides to go talk to Zava after Rupert leaves. Right? And he runs, and she runs into, in the hallway, she runs into Rupert. Right? As she's trying to go talk to Zava, his security guard's like, no, we're not going to do that. And she's talking to Rupert, and she congratulates Rupert on his recent win. And he gives credit to Nate. Obviously, he's like, oh, it's our new coach, Nate. Thanks for giving him to us, right? And then you see Zava come out, and Rupert introduces her to Zava. Introduces them, right? So she's got her introduction thanks to Rupert, right? Maybe he shouldn't have done that. And then Zava leaves. And Rebecca just goes to try and track Zava down, right? She busts into the men's restroom, goes up to the urinal where Zava's just proudly going hands-free piss into the urinal. And she barges in and she starts to talk shit to him, right? Tells him he's going to a team that doesn't even need him, right? She goes right at his ego, right? Saying that he's going to a good team, so he doesn't even have to prove he's still any good, right? They're going to win whether he shows up or not. So he's like, you're not even proving yourself anymore. You don't even need to prove that you're even any good. This is where you're going to a team that they don't even need you, right? Working at his ego. Insulting his ego. And it's just like, it's because you know you're not any good anymore. You don't even have to prove it anymore because you're going to a good team. She calls him overrated. She calls him overpaid. And she says that he eats too much asparagus, which, of course, funny pea joke. Cut to the game. Jamie passes across field to Sam, who kicks a goal, misses, hits one of the cross beams, but that bounces off of Danny's face. Again, Danny's face playing a critical role, but this time it actually goes in. It is a scene that made me laugh so hard to see the ball bounce off of the crossbeam of the goal, smash into Danny's face, which makes him fall to the ground, and the ball go in, and then everybody's just stoked. Hilarious. So funny, right? And Danny goes up to Jamie. He's like, oh, do you think Zava saw? Do you think he saw my face score that goal? Hilarious. Then you see Rebecca returning to her seat, letting them know that she just yelled at Zava, right? And Richmond ends up getting a draw, right? They tied up the score. They get a draw. During the press conference that Zava is put on to announce where he's going to go, right? To announce as a new player of Chelsea, supposedly, but we do know the title of this episode. Zava sits down, right? He's about to sign the contract to go play for Chelsea. And before signing the contract, he changes his mind, right? Rupert is in his car watching on his phone with a shit-eating grin on his face, going, yeah, here we go. He's going to announce that he's coming to West Ham, right? He's giggling like a little schoolgirl because like, I got him. I schmoozed him. I got another one, right? My charm still works. And Rebecca's like, I can't watch this. I don't want to watch this. And Zava says he's going to play for Richmond, right? The team sees the news and Beard yelps again. Beard, this is the episode where Beard yelps the most. That is like his shtick in this episode, yelping. Jamie thinks that the fans will be mad, right? I think Jamie is going to be a little jealous of this, right? Because Jamie and Danny are supposed to be the two aces. I think Jamie still thinks he's the top dog. But now with Zava, everybody loves Zava. Roy is stoked for Zava. Danny's stoked for Zava. The whole team's stoked for Zava. Management. Everybody's... Beard, but we didn't really get much stoke from Jamie Tart when it comes to, so he could be a little bit tentative about the Zava guy. Cut to the pub, like after Jamie says, oh man, I think the fans are going to be mad at this, and cut to the pub where, of course, as everybody else is, they're stoked. They're like, Zava is coming to Richmond, right? Everybody's stoked at the news. After the game, back in the offices, Roy tears up that old Trent Crimm article, and Ted asks Roy how it felt being back in Chelsea. And he said it felt sad, right? The last season that he played, he was there. They murdered Arsenal, but he played like shit, right? Despite they win, he played like shit, and that's when he knew he lost a step. Right, he knew he was only going to get worse. Like he was on the downside, the back end of his career, and everyone was shocked when he left to play Chelsea, or left Chelsea. And he didn't want to be that player who kind of held on past their prime. Right, so many, especially in athletics. Right, they need that competition. They need. Like, I got to go out on a win, right? I got to go. The dream is to go out on top, and that's what he felt like he did, right? As soon as he saw they got that win, but he knew he had lost a step. So being back, right, he regrets his decision, right, and thinks he should have stayed and just enjoyed himself and not, played more with the heart and not the ego. And maybe I think that's why he broke up with Keeley, right? Leave when you notice the high is gone, right? That what do they call that in relationships? The honeymoon period in relationships was starting to wither in his relationship with Keeley, and that's probably why he left. So I think this reflection that Roy is having on his decision to leave Chelsea to go then play, I assume he went to Richmond after that, is similar to his decision to break up with Keeley. And because he regrets leaving Chelsea, he probably also is, especially since every single human being he encounters that finds out that he broke up with her thinks that he is an insane man, including me. So I think this moment at the end of the episode is kind of, we're seeing Roy kind of realize, and even the characters in the episode are like, oh, that's kind of a poignant metaphor, don't you think? So I think maybe he broke up with Keeley because he thought, especially since they were going to be busy, she's doing her own thing, he's like, the relationship's not going to be the same. It's not going to be as good as it was. So why even be in this relationship? It's not going to be as good as it was. And Ted says that if he stayed, they may never have met. So Ted's like happy that he left, right? And gives him a little winky face. So that is how the episode ends. A funny episode. Seriously, Danny using his face to get the goal made me laugh so hard. Rebecca steps up big, right, in her ongoing battle against Rupert and succeeds in getting Zava, right? She's like, screw this. I'm going to use my strengths to get this guy, knowing how I can play it on his ego to make him want to, like, prove me wrong, right? Who's a player, Zava, a player who everyone is super excited about, except for Jamie, not necessarily excited, right? So there might be some drama there. Keeley's new hire of her friend is probably going to be not good, probably going to end poorly. There's going to be a moment where there is going to be a confrontation with her, and it probably will be a moment that brings Keeley and Barbara, the CFO, together, would be my guess, right? The beef between Roy and Trent was pretty predictable. Is like the question of why Roy would have a problem with him made sense, right? But it was definitely nice for that aspect of this episode so that we got to know a little bit more about Roy and hear about why he left Chelsea and how that also probably relates to why he ended his relationship with Keeley. So seeing how those, maybe he has some regrets about that as well. And just further makes me think that they're going to get back together soon at some point. He's going to realize that he made a mistake and they're going to try and work it out. Whether it works out or not, but I think there's going to be an attempt made, right? And it seems like everybody will be excited about that. Even Jamie will be excited if they got back together. The coaching staff doesn't really, like, last episode, Ted Lasso was questioning why he's still in London. This episode, seeing how little the coaching staff is doing anything, only more confirms why is he even there. Like, they're clearly, like, Jamie is the one that kind of came up with this idea, and Danny's face accidentally made that idea come to fruition. But coaching staff not doing much. Beard pretty much just yelped, which was funny, but kind of feels like he was underused in this episode. And in general, there was no Nate there was mention of Nate by Rupert, but no Nate in this episode. Some just general thoughts that I noticed. The stadium filming felt so much bigger. Obviously, they were filming at Chelsea Stadium, so it's a bigger stadium, I'm sure. But it just felt like, even in the bar, it felt like they were shooting this show in a way that made it look even more cinematic, which I appreciated. Right? Maybe they have a bigger budget for this season, or, they had time in their big break, so maybe they were coming up with how to improve the way the show looks and clearly seems like they punched up the script as much as possible. Even though I do think the punching up of the script feels a little extra, right? Almost feels like they did too much, right? It feels like they're trying to push too many jokes inside every moment, where instead of just kind of letting it feel more natural, which I think it did in the previous seasons. And it looks like everybody spent this time off between season 2, and season 3 working out. Like Isaac looks like he lost weight, like he's jacked. Jamie and Danny both look like they're jacked. Like compared to what they looked like in previous seasons, everybody looks like they spent the entire break just working out. Maybe not Ted, but all the soccer players. Next episode, episode 3, season 3, episode 3 is 4-5-1. I have a feeling that is in reference to the formation that they are going to play soccer, and maybe that Zava is that head guy maybe. But next episode, Richmond adjusts to an exciting change, obviously the addition of Zava, and Jamie has his reservations. Ted learns that there's something new going on back in Kansas as well, which obviously there's hinting at that his ex-wife has a new man who gave his son the Infinity Gauntlet. Clearly made sense that Jamie would be the only guy that's not super stoked about this Zava guy. So it'll be interesting to see where we go in the next episode, which that little description doesn't really tell us anything that we don't already know. But either way, that is a wrap on another incredible episode of the Ted Lasso Recap Podcast. Y'all have been tuning in, and I couldn't be more grateful. There's a fly that is bugging me, and it's just flying everywhere, and I'm just saying, it's interrupting this outro, right? Because y'all have been tuning in, and I couldn't be more grateful. If you're loving what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing and leaving me a review. I want to make sure I'm hitting the bullseye every time I step up to the mic. Now, I know y'all have opinions, and I want to hear them. Reach out to me on social media at Ray Taylor Show on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for as long as TikTok is allowed to exist in the United States. And let me know what you're thinking. I promise to read every message with the same enthusiasm as Ted coaching his team to victory. And finally, I can't wait to get back with y'all next week for another deep dive into the world of Ted Lasso. So until then, stay curious, stay kind, and stay gold, folks.
New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.